Well, it's just 10 on my clock. Should we kick it
Yes,
off? Yeah,
yes.
all right. Oh God, this is so exciting. So, thanks for coming, everyone. My name is Deborah Baron. These are my wonderful friends and colleagues, Jacqueline Hollows and Wyn Morgan. I am the editor of a publication on Medium called Less Stress, More Success. And I created this publication to share with the world an understanding called the three principles that come from the teachings of a gentleman named Sydney Banks. And the three of us are all contributing writers to the publication, and we're all students and teachers of this understanding called the three principles, which has been life-changing to the three of us and to all of the people that we work with and interact with and share this understanding with the world. So we're super excited to bring this to you guys and hope that this can be a step for you into this really awesome understanding. We have three sessions today. We're going to be addressing three different topics from a perspective of these principles. And we're going to do our best to make these sessions as interactive as possible. It's a short time period for us. We're used to having platforms where we can talk a lot longer. So that might be a little bit of a challenge for us. But I just, before I hand this over, Jacqueline's going to start us off today. Before I hand it over to her, I just want to say that if you have a question that doesn't get answered today, really want to encourage you to reach out to us. We're all really easy to find, and especially through our Medium platforms. And also want to say that if this sparks your interest in learning more about the principles, and then you want to write about your experience in learning about the principles, we're always looking for new writers, and we want to hear your voice, and we want to hear people's voice about how they're being impacted by this understanding. So I also want to put that out there too and encourage people. So Jacqueline, who's also known as Mama J, handing it over to you to kick us off.
Thank you. So I'm Jacqueline Hollows, Mama J, and on Medium I think I'm JB, and that's because I decided I wanted an author name. And the topic of this subject of this session is the cure for too much thinking, I think. And wouldn't we all like that? So I am a chronic overthinker. I have been a chronic overthinker, and overthinking in my world manifests in a number of different ways. So I see that many of the things that we talk about in different ways, they're actually overthinking. So overwhelm is me overthinking about the workload that I've got on. It's rarely to do with the actual workload. Stress and anxiety is actually overthinking about something that's outside of our control and trying to fix that, and so on. So we could list a number of ways that overthinking shows up. And to call it overthinking isn't to take away from the experience, which is sometimes really horrible, that people have, including myself. It is actually just to give it a title for what's really going on. Now, we live in a world of tools and techniques, reframing things, thinking about things in a different way, using things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, to look at things in a different way, meditation, mindfulness, all of these things that you could list off a whole load of them. And they're all really, in one form or another, tools and techniques that point towards having the person experience their own mind in a different way. So one of the things that we talk about and that we share is what I'd call upstream from those tools and techniques. If I could use a whiteboard, I'd do a whiteboard thing of this. But basically, all of those things in one way or another are all pointing to or lie on top of the foundation of what's going on in our minds, how a human being experiences life. And we talk about this so that people can have I won't say easier, because it's not always easy, but it's a simpler solution, because it's about understanding how it's working and then having a realization or an insight into what I'm personally doing, and then things change automatically. Now, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, okay, let's just do that then, because sometimes that can take a little while. We have habits of thinking, we have blind spots, we think way more than we know. I've heard one quote that something like 120,000 thoughts per day that we have, and we don't even know 10 of them. And so no wonder we overthink, right? Because if we're constantly in that churn, then we can latch on to certain thoughts and have them be nagging at us constantly. I'll pause there in case you guys want to jump in with anything. You guys as in the panel, or you guys as in the audience. If you want to ask any questions, I'll just pause.
And I'd love to just make sure that we're receiving the questions. If anybody, maybe somebody wants to just put a test question in, or even just a comment, because I've still got a button that says announce Q&A.
Oh, well, no, I have loads of comments.
Oh, interesting.
And they well, all saying that they can hear and see us.
Okay.
Anyway,
okay, got it.
Questions, do throw them in the chat, in the Q&A section that's on the right hand side on my screen, and we'll answer those.
I see one here that says overthinking is then imagination question.
Oh, you can see something I can't see. That's a great question. We can use our imagination to overthink, for sure. And we experience our imagination through the power of thought. So I'll just break down one little thing. There's what we call thinking, which is what we're experiencing right now of the thoughts that go on in our head. And they can be thoughts about anything. So somebody could be in here and thinking about what's for breakfast, or what's for dinner, or who are these strange people, or what's the weather like, I'd rather go out, or whatever. So we're all having these different thoughts that are personal to us. And then we like to talk about the power of thought. So the power of thought is just pointing to the fact that we think. Human beings think, and we all have that in common. But what we think is individual to each person. So when we don't understand the power of thought, like I didn't, and I'm still learning about it, it's very easy to get trapped in our own thinking. So overthinking, if you talk about it in a different way, being attached to personal thought creates certain things like anxiety or overwhelm. And I'll talk about overwhelm because that's the one that I get the most. So sometimes I look at my projects and my things to do, and I feel totally overwhelmed. And it's not a nice feeling, and I struggle with it. And so things that pop into my head are like, I'm useless, or I need 3 months off, or all sorts of things pop into my head. But the feeling of overwhelm is saying to me, I've got too much work and I can't do it, and there's a problem. How I know that that is just me overthinking in the moment is that another day, or in fact, in another hour or another minute, I can have exactly the same workload and feel totally different. Feel like I'm on top of it. I've got it. All I have to do is this. Have a totally different perspective. And it's been so helpful for me to see that that perspective didn't come from anything that I did outside of my own mind. It purely came from my mind changing itself and focusing on something different. When before I knew that my mind was capable of doing that, I would try to fix the overwhelm. So I would try to have a technique that, you know, if I go for a walk and if I do this and if I do that and if I meditate for, you know, an hour a day, and if I read first thing in the morning, if I'm grateful, then I won't have this overwhelm. But they only work occasionally. And then the other thing I would do is I would try to not have so many things to do. And there's a difference between overwhelm and overwork. You can have too many things to do, but you might not feel overwhelmed about it. So the 3 principles point to being able to see what's really going on. That when I'm feeling like that, it's actually an indicator to tell me that I'm seeing through a lens of overwhelm. And that when I'm not in that fog, things could look different. It doesn't mean that that I don't have to do anything. It just means that I don't have to take that thinking too seriously. I see that there's a couple of questions. Shall I take the questions, guys? Okay. I love CBT when it's done correctly. How do you differentiate it? Great question.
Can I just jump in there for a second? Because I was gonna, I actually am seeing now that I can approve questions, and then they seem to be popping up. And I just wanted to, and Jacqueline, you're more than welcome to answer that question, but I did want to encourage the person who asked it to join us a little later this morning, because we're going to do a whole session on CBT.
Yeah. And so that is the next session at 5:30. The last one. Okay.
The last one. Yeah.
Yes. So come and join that, and we'll hold that thought. And we can talk to that. What about overthinking? How do you differentiate between overthinking and deep thinking? Is there an acid test? I think I'll answer this, but my colleagues might be able to jump in and save me if they have a better answer. My answer would be the acid test is how you feel. If we don't recognize our feelings as a barometer, our feelings are telling us what's going on in our head. And if we are feeling okay or good or useful, you're probably on the right track. If we're feeling stressed or anxious or overwhelmed, that's merely showing us that we are using our overthinking too much. And so it's the difference can be told by how you're feeling about something. We need a way longer session. Okay. What's next? How to remove overthinking and reduce stress. Well, I recommend Deborah's article on this, because she has actually written an article about this. And what that article points to is getting a quiet mind. So one of the things that we're never taught about is our quiet mind. No matter what that looks like, it looks different for everybody. Our quiet mind comes up with all sorts of answers. And whatever we need to do to forget that last sentence, we naturally have a quiet mind. So the first ingredient that we get when we're born is a quiet mind and the ability to just be in life. And then as we have experiences and learnings and so on, we then create thought about the world. And then we live in that world of thought. It's like our own little separate reality. And so somebody says here of mixing what's real and unreal. That's a great point. So we mix up what we think about things that have happened to us, but we look at it all through a perspective depending on what that perspective is today. So if we've had a bad experience of weather, we see the weather through this perspective of the bad experience, for instance. And we struggle then to have a different perspective. But in actual fact, the default setting of a human being is a calm and quiet mind. So you'll hear us all, and if you read our stuff, pointing to that naturally we can fall into a calm state of mind. But because we're not really used to that, we often find it a little more difficult than it seems. And so to that question that was down the line there, what I would say is how to remove overthinking and reduce stress is have a little think about the times when you feel calm, and you'll start to notice when you feel calm, and even if it's 1 minute of the whole day that you feel calm, if you start to notice the times that you feel calm, you'll start to notice something about yourself. So I could say, oh, go for a walk, or have more sleep, or do this thing. But actually, for each individual, that might not work. So you'll get your own answers from that quiet mind, and find your quiet mind by just noticing when it is quieter, because we tend to notice the noise more than we notice the quiet. And if you notice the quiet, you'll start to see the quiet happens more often than you think. I hope that's helpful. There's lots of comments and questions. We tend to mix what's real and what's unreal and things that never happened before. Should we steer? How should we steer or focus on what is exactly is real right now? Nice. So Joseph, I feel like you're pointing towards being in the now. And you know, like you've probably heard a lot about this, being present and being in the now. When we get really, really present with whatever it is that we're doing, and that can be making a cup of tea, that could be with your workload, that could be with another human being. When we get really, really present, we notice that there's really only now happening. And then so we don't have to think about what's happened before or what's happened in the future or what's going to happen in the future. So getting present is another way of saying leaning into our quiet mind. If you get present, and if you could do this right now, if you get really present right now, you'll notice that your mind calms a little. This is like speed dating. speed overthinking. I feel so irritated and stage fear, going through depression because of many reasons: health, financial, relationship, many more. How to stop overthinking? Please share. Oh, that sounds really horrible. That sounds really horrible. So when you're going through stuff, it feels really real. and nobody's going to say differently to that. The best thing you can do while you're going through it, I feel like there's two good things you can do. One is imagine that you are on an aeroplane, not literally, and what do they tell you to do when you're going through turbulence? Strap in. So when you're going through a really tough time like that, you have to sort of strap in and just get yourself into a position where you're like, right, okay, I'm here. It's really tough for me right now, but this will pass. The thing that stops it from passing, really sadly, is what we do with it. So we mix it up. We make it worse for ourselves very innocently by trying to fix it, trying to get over it quicker, and so on. So in a way, if you can accept where you are right now and be patient with yourself and be present with life, I'm pretty sure, and I would say, I'd even go as far as saying 100% sure, that small little things occur to you that you might be ignoring, small little things that might be able to help you. And I'll really quickly tell you that I had a breakdown about 4 years ago. And if you like, a stress-induced breakdown. And I literally broke down. My head was foggy. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I had to cancel everything. I just cried all the time. It was horrendous. It really didn't feel nice at all. And I honestly thought that I would never feel any different. But because I am a student of this understanding, the 3 principles, and because I've been sharing it for a long time, I knew that something would occur to me to help me. And lots of people gave me really good advice. Speak to this teacher, get some pills, you know, do this thing, get some sun, etc., take some vitamins. Lots of people gave some lovely, well-meaning advice, but I knew that none of that advice was really for me, that my own intuition or my own essence of self would tell me what my advice was, and that if I just be patient and be calm, I'll hear it. And it's like a little tiny violin in the orchestra of your noisy mind, and it will say something simple. So it said simple things to me like, lie down, go outside, make a cup of tea. It wasn't groundbreaking. I didn't get a fall and suddenly I'm better. I literally just took each tiny step and tiny little bit of insight, I call it, and followed that. And how you can tell if it's insight or if it's overthinking is that it's very simple and it doesn't have any opinion. So if I had the thought, or perhaps I should speak to a 3 principles teacher, that came with a lot of, oh, which one, and all this and all that, and a lot of noise. If I had the insight, get some fresh air, it didn't come with anything. It was just like really obvious, like go for a wee. It didn't have anything on it. And I just did that, and eventually that time passed and I felt better, and I did have a big insight at the end of it. But during the ride, be patient, be calm, and see if you can hear those little nudges. And it will be a little bit like, oh, I need to eat, you know, the feeling that you get when you need to go for a wee, for instance. You know that that's what you need to do. You can override it. You can, if you're anything like me, sit and work through it. But eventually you have to go. So listen out for those little nudges, and you will get there. Thank you so much for that question. 6 minutes to go. Shall I carry on, guys? Answering the question?
Something occurred to me to share. Is that okay?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay. So when I first came across this understanding and I started being able to notice that I was thinking, like I didn't really notice that I was thinking before. It was just part of me. It was like my head and my brain and myself lived in this world of thought, and it felt like it was me. Like and I didn't even notice it as a thing. And then I realized that I was thinking. And one of the first visuals that started to happen to me that allowed me to separate myself from thinking or quiet my thinking was was it was this visual of a ticker tape, that my thoughts were coming into my head and going out of my head all day long, and that I didn't need to live in the midst of it. And I started to visualize it above me instead of in me. And so it's like the thoughts were still coming and going, but I was, instead of being in them, I was like under them. And I was able to kind of let them go and watch them go without being in them in the same way. And that to me was a huge revelation, like a huge insight that I could kind of watch them without being in them and without taking them on. And for me, that was one of the first steps to experiencing a quieter mind. And now, it's like 7 years later, and I've actually, because of spending so much time noticing, when I notice that my thoughts are getting the best of me, that they're getting busy, I've actually become able to like drop out of it and to come back into the moment. And just they just kind of like drop, like I drop out of my thoughts. So yeah, maybe that's something. Anyway,
It's
that's my
beautiful.
share. Yeah.
Do you want to
I'd like to
Wyn? Yeah.
add on that. Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. Deborah, that kind of reminded me of something that a lot of the questions that we're getting, and thanks for asking them, everyone. This is awesome to get your questions through. A lot of them are, what do I do about my overthinking? Which is something that Jacqueline's pointed at and Deborah's pointing at. And it's something that I, in the same way as my two friends here would do, is that I would think myself out of overthinking, or try to, without realizing that that just couldn't work, because I'd be drowning and drinking water at the same time was an insight that I had a long time ago about that. And therefore, doing something, which is often the mental activity, doing something to do less doing in my mind, stopped making sense. But it stopped making sense when I understood and saw for myself that the mind, in its nature, quietens itself down when I'm not stirring it up. And when I saw the truth of that, and I had to see that for me, I would then be less involved in stirring it up, and my mind would settle down, and I could hear that the voice that Jacqueline was mentioning. And I could notice that the ticker tape was something I didn't have to involve myself in, go back to Deborah's metaphor. So there's another question here from Peter, which is a question that I can really relate to: what to do when mood changes your style day by day. Yeah, well, mood changes my style hour by hour. And it's not something I'm overly concerned about anymore when I used to be. And the one reason is because, well, if I understand what moods can do, what overthinking can do is just get me stirred up, and I don't have to do anything about that, it will settle down, then I'm less prone to be acting out on my overthinking. Less prone to be, but look, there's no perfection here. We're all human.
So I'm gonna stop us here because we actually have another session that starts in a minute. So I would like to invite you all to that one, where we're going to be talking about living in less stress and finding higher levels of productivity from that space of less stress. So you're all welcome to join us in the next session. And also just remind you, if you had a question that didn't get answered, please reach out to us. Any one of us is happy to answer your questions on an individual basis. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, everybody, so much. See you.